Israel has issued an unprecedented evacuation order, telling more than 1 million Palestinians to leave northern Gaza before it launches its massive ground invasion. And if you can, I don't understand how diabolical this is. Hamas is telling Palestinians to stay in their homes.
Well, the order came shortly after Israel's new emergency government took office. The country and its leadership are both united in their determination to defeat the terrorists. And worldwide support for Israel is gaining ground as never before. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
Thursday night, Israel's new emergency government was sworn in. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu explained why.
Since October 7, 2023, at 6 o'clock in the morning, because of the war that was forced on the State of Israel through a murderous terrorist attack from the Gaza Strip.
The new government includes former IDF Chief of Staff Benny Gantz and several members of the opposition parties. As the IDF amasses a huge military force on the Gaza border, it's warning civilians in Gaza to get out of harm's way to save Palestinian lives.
And I would like to read verbatim, word for word, the message that we sent, obviously in Arabic, to the local population in Gaza City, informing them of the need to evacuate from where they are for their own safety. This is the message. The IDF calls for the evacuation of all civilians from Gaza City. I'll zoom in a second, from Gaza City, from their homes southwards for their own safety and protection, and to move to the area south of Wadi Gaza, the river Gaza, as shown on the map.
We are not seeing the residents of Gaza Strip as our enemies. Hamas is our enemy. Hamas is our enemy and will pay the price of what he did to us. People are saying Israel is revenging. No, it's not revenge. How can you revenge 1-year-old baby that they shot him in the head? What is the revenge for it? There is no revenge for it. This is just a war and an operational strategy of Israel to eliminate Hamas of its power.
Hamas is claiming they did not target civilians.
We here would like to stress that there were clear instructions from the top commander of Al-Qassam brigades to avoid targeting civilians or killing them.
Yonah Bob, military correspondent for the Jerusalem Post, witnessed the carnage in the kibbutz Be'eriv.
People are saying Hamas is ISIS, and that's what happened, because when you have women, children, babies, elderly being slaughtered, heads being cut off, blood everywhere, the pictures, the videos that have come out, what they did to these communities was just horrific, monstrous. We could just go on with the adjectives, and that is what has turned the world. I don't say the world was for Hamas before, but the world is behind Israel on a level that hasn't been in a very long time because of the, utter barbarity that they saw from Hamas in this case, in Be'eri, which I just saw, and in another 21 communities.
Yeah. Israel is also building up its presence along the northern border in case of fighting with Hezbollah. Today's actions come after the U.S. and Qatar reach an agreement that Qatar will not act on any request from Iran to access the $6 billion in Iranian funds that were unblocked as part of a prisoner swap last month. And Jews around the world were urged to be cautious after a former Hamas chief called for a day of jihad by Muslims for today. But for now, the focus is on Gaza and Israel's apparently imminent ground invasion.
I can't imagine a government urging its citizens to stay in the place, to stay in their homes as they're facing imminent invasion. Here's a fact, and it's an historical fact. Go back to 2006. Under the Bush administration, they were trying to encourage the Arab Spring. Let's have democracy spread throughout the Middle East. Let's stop these dictatorships. Let's stop all the violence, all the extremism. And they arranged for there to be free and open elections in Gaza. What did the people of Gaza do? They elected Hamas. They elected a terrorist group to rule them. And so now they're reaping that. And for that same group to say, we're not going to be here for you, we're not going to allow you to evacuate, we're going to force you to stay in your own homes, it's absolutely diabolical. And to hear them say, the soldiers, the horrible invasion, that they weren't ordered to rape, they weren't ordered to kill children. Well, we have an audio recording from the same group saying, yes, this was our tactic. This was one of the things we ordered them to do. It's like they expect the world to listen to their lies and go along with it. I've got to call them on it. That's a complete and total lie. For more on this story, let's go to Chris Mitchell, our CBN Israel Jerusalem Bureau Chief. So, Chris, tell us about the ground invasion. It just seems to be potential for casualties on both sides. When I look at it, the U.S. has already decided that our special forces aren't up for the task. So if the IDF is going to tread in here, I mean, when Navy SEALs say we don't want to go in, this is obviously going to be a prolonged and horrific battle.
Yeah, it should be, Gordon. You know, Hamas has had years to build tunnels underneath Gaza City, booby traps, and that's really the nightmare scenario for the IDF forces. That's why time after time, even though they've gone into conflicts with Hamas, they have avoided a ground invasion. I think 2014 was the one exception because urban warfare is the worst kind of warfare, and Hamas are their kind of masters at putting booby traps and tunnels. You know, I would also say, Gordon, that this is not the first time that the IDF and Israel has warned people in Gaza to get out of harm's way. Time after time, they've dropped leaflets, they call people, they send text messages, they do everything they can to get civilians out of harm's way. And, you know, having Hamas tell people to stay, even though there may be a bombing campaign or an invasion, reminds me of ISIS. Back in Mosul, when the Iraqi army was trying to get ISIS out of Mosul, they actually were shooting civilians as they were leaving. So they wanted them as human shields. And so it's very reminiscent of ISIS, what they've done in many of these communities and what they're doing today.
Well, we're looking straight on the face of evil. It's just, I don't understand how they're still considered human. It's just, it's beyond words. Let's look at the long-term effects of the war, and I speak as an American. We had 9/11. We went into Afghanistan, the Taliban. This is clearly where they were trained in how to take over airplanes. All of that was quite evident to the whole world. We had a military occupation for now over 20 years. And when we left, who takes over? The Taliban once again. And so once again, Afghanistan is back under an extreme Muslim government under terrorist control. So looking at Gaza, what do you think the long-term effects will be?
Well, I'm not sure anyone knows that, Gordon, but I can say that it's very hard to look at what's going to happen after the military campaign. I think I can remember back to 1967 when Moshe Dayan, then Israel's defense minister, was looking at Gaza and not sure he really wanted to occupy that. So it's a very difficult place to actually govern once you take over. I think Egypt doesn't want to take over. So the long-term effects of this are still yet to be found out. But I think right now we're looking at this campaign. Who knows how long it may be? Someone was saying earlier, pray for a miracle. I mean, there was a miracle in 1967 in the Six-Day War. Perhaps this campaign can be shorter and less deadly on both sides. That certainly would be a welcome relief after so much carnage in the last 6 days. But we are looking at the imminent invasion. And I would add, Gordon, this is the front page of today's Jerusalem Post. It says, Israel, which is the people of Israel will win. I don't think I've seen Israelis so unified right now in so many ways. You have restaurants cooking food for soldiers on the front lines. You have people doing anything and everything they can to show support for their soldiers on the front lines. And again, as I've said before, this is a family. Israel is a family. 360 reservists have been called up, so almost everyone is involved in this war. It could be a son, a daughter, a father, a mother involved in the army, a cousin, a friend. And so Israelis are so unified right now. They want to eradicate this evil once and for all. And at the same time, they want to save Palestinian lives.
Well, what can you tell us about the Day of Jihad? I hear that there's already been an attack in Paris, this worldwide call for a day of rage, a day of jihad. What are you hearing in Jerusalem?
Well, that was the call by former Hamas leader Khaled Mashal, and he had said this is the day of rage. It's Friday. This is the day of prayer for Muslims worldwide. And he was rallying them around a call that has gone back over 100 years, which is Save the Al-Aqsa Mosque here in Jerusalem. It's the third holiest site for many Muslims in their religion. And the call and the accusation is what they're doing, what Israel is doing, is undermining or going to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Back to Hosseini back in the 1920s. That was the beginning of the call. It's lasted ever since. So far, it's been quiet here in Jerusalem. There was that attack in Paris, but the whole idea is to rally Muslims around what Hamas has done in right there in Israel. And I would also say that the rockets are still going here, Gordon. There was a rocket that went has a 250-kilometer, about 150-mile range, and hit all the way to Haifa. So even though there's a bombing campaign going on by the IDF against Gaza, they're still firing rockets, still near the southern communities, and now all the way to Haifa.
Well, they called the invasion the Al-Aqsa flood, and I just don't understand how you can kill babies and claim that you're doing it in the name of God. No. I don't understand that at all. Chris, thanks for your support. Thanks for your insight. We're certainly going to be praying for you and the entire team there. May you stay safe.
Amen. Thank you.
Let me underline another piece of history. In my view, the Palestinian people are essentially ungovernable. So you heard about Moshe Dayan saying we can't possibly govern them in Gaza. It doesn't work. All the Arab nations around Israel have refused them. They say, no, you can't come in. And part of that is when the Palestinians come in, they try to overthrow the government of the host country. So they did that in Jordan, and they tried to overthrow the king and replace him with a radical Palestinian government. That caused Jordan to say, well, if that's what you're going to do here, we're going to throw you out. And where did they go? They went to Lebanon, which used to be the jewel of the Mediterranean. It used to be a showcase where Muslims and Christians and Jews and, every religion can all get along. We can all have a government together. What happened? Well, it turned into an absolute nightmare. And they formed terrorist cells, and it turned into partisan fighting on religious grounds, and Lebanon is absolutely destroyed today. So when you see the evidence of it, when you see what people are really like, well, let's believe them the first time we see it. Why does it take decades of seeing it to finally wake up? This is a huge problem, and it's not just a problem for Israel, it's a problem for all of us. Because after Israel, who's their next target? Well, it's you and me, and they've already declared that. Well, a bipartisan group of lawmakers from the U.S. met with Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel this week. They showed solidarity with Israelis by supporting them against the horrific attacks from Hamas. One senator on that trip spoke with CBN's Matt Galka after arriving back in the United States.
We have spent the day in Israel meeting with a number of affected families and speaking with leaders.
Iowa Senator Joni Ernst traveled to Israel just days after the brutal attack from Hamas. She led a bipartisan congressional delegation to the Middle East that first met with leaders in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain.
I was very adamant about continuing our trip into Israel to show solidarity with Israeli leaders and the people of Israel against these horrific Hamas attacks. brutal, violent attacks.
The senator, along with 2 House Republicans and 3 Democrats, talked with Netanyahu about helping in the fight.
The prime minister shared with us different items that they might need. And of course, we need to make sure that we're reconstituting the Iron Dome.
As the number of dead and wounded continues to rise, Ernst says the conversations with survivors still stick with her. She met an Israeli family that defended themselves as Hamas terrorists invaded their farm.
The Hamas terrorists, as they invaded the home, bought some very precious time for their mother to escape, but their brother was murdered in this attack as well. They have no idea where their father is. They don't know his condition, if he's even still alive.
Ernst and a growing number of Republicans and Democrats have pushed the Biden administration to freeze $6 billion released to Iran as part of a prisoner swap deal. As accusations fly about Iran's possible role in Israel, pressure has grown, leading to reports that money is again frozen, although White House officials won't acknowledge it publicly.
I'm not going to talk about diplomatic conversations one way or another, Ed. What I can tell you is that every single dime of that money is still sitting in the Qatari bank. Not one dime of it has been spent.
Ernst says pressure must remain on the Biden administration to enforce Iranian sanctions.
This deal never should have happened in the first place, and I have been highly critical of the Biden administration for continuing to appease Iran. We know they are the largest state sponsor of terrorism. They fund organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, the Houthis, and they create chaos in the Middle East. Iran fears peace. And so they continue to engage in these types of terror attacks against our friend and ally Israel.
Senator Ernst also said that the lack of a Speaker of the House in Congress was worrisome because it prevents the United States from providing any sort of congressional aid. She said that every ally they met with in the Middle East was concerned about the situation. Matt Gelka, CBN News.
Well, we want you to know the truth behind the Jewish and Arab claims to the land of Israel. So we put together a DVD that gives the historical background to the news you're seeing today. It's called Whose Land Is It? It has the answers to questions such as whether or not Gaza and the West Bank are, quote, occupied territory, close quote. Why the Palestinian refugee crisis still remains a problem today, more than 70 years after the 1948 war. Well, you can receive a DVD copy of Whose Land Is It? It's for a gift of any dollar amount. All you have to do is go to cbn.com/whoseland or call us 1-800-700-7000.